this in particular on policy related to eco-design and waste-related policies such as WEEE and the Waste Framework Directive. WEEE is the Waste Electronics and Electrical Equipment to the normal, I guess you call it. But also he's more than just looking at policies. He's also very active in a project called WEEE, you can also spell this out later if you want, which seeks to create a culture of waste prevention and reuse of electronics in police. So very down to the ground, down to earth. So in 50 minutes, I'm hoping you all set up. We also learned from Nico that if you want to change, you should do it here. Then also do it. The floor is yours. Take it away. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you very much, Martin. So, just checking if everything is working. Perfect. Okay. So we are reuse. Reuse with 2 R's. Why? Because we are reuse and recycling European Union social enterprises, which is very convenient. I'm quite proud of the Commons officials who managed to get that. So what are we doing? We represent these social enterprises who are working on reuse, repair, recycling. So who are they exactly? They are mainly structures which were created firstly to create jobs for people who are at risk of socio-economic exclusion, meaning long-term unemployed people, refugees, people who have disabilities, which make it difficult for them to get jobs. So we have 29 members across 24 EU countries, plus one in the USA, it's in New York. So our main activities so far. So firstly, it's a collection, sorting and distribution of second-hand textiles. So more or less everywhere in Europe, United States, like in more and more countries, you have these textile containers where you go and put your used textiles, the one that you don't want to wear anymore. It will be collected and then sorted up to be then reused in second-hand shops. So some of our members are doing that. It's one of the main activities. Then we also have obviously the same activity but for electronics, where in that context more repair activities will be handled, but not necessarily. We have a lot of members who reuse electronics, but only these electronics which they manage to collect and which already works, because it can take a lot of skills and to repair these things, so it's not necessarily done all the time, but more and more they see the opportunity in developing repair activities, and even some of them are developing repair activities for consumers, because like historically our activities is more about collecting products from donations, from enterprises changing their stock of computers, things like this. So they receive things that people discarded and then repair it. Now they also have repair activities, but for if you want to get your thing repaired, you go at them and then we repair it. So like a classic, let's say, repair activity. So then usually they also have second-hand shops where they will display all the products that they managed to collect and refurbish. They also want, not that much anymore, but on recyclable products, but I have to admit that this activity is way less interesting than before, because more and more with like this task is handled by municipalities. It was one of the first tasks that they handled, but then with waste legislation in Europe, this activity became controlled by municipalities or by EPR schemes that I will tackle a little bit later. But they work a lot with books, toys, like any product which still has values on the secondary market, they collect it and refurbish and resell it. And they also take part, and the word is not there anymore, but we also have a lot of our members launching campaigns to raise awareness about buying second-hand, about the social impact that their purchase decision can have, because of course by buying the second-hand products, they will help the social economy sector and will help people to get a job. And it's also to raise awareness on maintenance attitude that you can have to extend the lifetime of your products. They also give a few tips like to repair your own products. They also get a lot involved since quite recently in repair cafes. They also organize repair cafes themselves. And so they really try to educate the consumer as well. And so as I mentioned before, so we work a lot on the integration of disadvantaged groups on the job market. It's not also necessarily training, like it depends a lot on the context, on the people who need their help, because you can have like structures like Emmaüs in France, which is quite famous all over the world, where it started all with during a very harsh winter in 2050. L'Abbé Pierre wanted to help these people who didn't have a job, and they had to find an activity, to find something to be able to get food, to get housing, and they said that it would be the poor helping the poor, meaning that they will gather and try to collect everything that they could from people's house. So they will just knock at doors and ask, do you have anything that you want to give away? And then they also collected from waste collection points, which were not as developed as they are today. But they really wanted to really provide housing and food to these people. So this activity was really to get housing and food. And then by developing, they focused more and more on training and being able to make these people get a job back after this kind of step in their life. So we took out data from 2017 activity reports. So we managed to collect 1,000 tons of products throughout our membership. So we represent 160,000 employees and volunteers and also trainees. And in 1,000 different social enterprises spread all around Europe. Unfortunately, not in Germany. So if you know social economic enterprises, we know Recycling Börse, for example. I don't know if you know this organization. Verwertung as well, which is more focused on textile in Germany. So we have 7,000 shops welcoming 40 million customers in 2017. So yeah, the reason why, even though our members are conducting both reuse and recycling activities, and the reason why we focus more on reuse, it's because given that the main objective of our members is to create jobs, the activity which creates jobs the most when we look at waste management, it's prevention and reuse. So this is for this reason at first, but then we also realize, of course, that it's at the top of the waste hierarchy, so it also makes sense environmentally to waste activities. And it's also because we realize that several studies, including this one from 2013, conducted in Ireland. So they found out that at bulky waste collection points, more than a third of what is collected could be actually refurbished, repaired, and resold. Only if the collection systems were set up in a way which safeguard reusability, which is not the case yet. We also, thanks to several studies, find out that if 1% of municipal waste in Europe was prepared for reuse, we could create 200,000 local jobs. And it's also a point that we raise often when we lobby European Commission, is to say that these jobs that repair activities can create are local. And that's also, in terms of waste management, it makes a lot of sense because notion that is the proximity principle, which means that the closest the collection point, the treatment center are, the less it has impact on the environment, because of course you save transportation costs. And then we also find out in Flanders that for every person unemployed and working at a social enterprise, there is net return to the government of 12,000 euros. So it's actually saving money for a municipality to operate these activities. And so this is when I wanted to show you a video, so I advise you, if you can maybe come this way. I don't know if you can really see the video properly from where you are over here. And maybe I will need to push a button to click in the middle of so it will introduce a video that we realized recently of our member Envie Autonomie. So Envie was before on focusing on larger solar appliances, and now they also decided to work to develop activities on medical equipment. So to collect and to have partnerships with hospitals, with retirement houses, to have access to second-hand products, and to second-hand medical equipment, and to sell them at a very reduced price, because this is an equipment which is very expensive. It's also very important in terms of that people have access to this material, and I was flabbergasted when I learned about the price of this material and how little the social security is actually reimbursing to people in need of this equipment. So yeah, I just hope we start.
It's going to be in French, so we don't.
It's going to be in French, but subtitled in English. So there is no sound, but it's okay because you'll be able to read. Yeah.
The audio device in another room, but would have been French, so maybe you can hear me otherwise.
So yeah, it's a video a little bit long, but I think it's really the perfect video to explain how important our activities can be and the social impact that it can have. And this is why we want then at yeah. Can I get the presentation back? Great. I will just. So, as we repeated a few times since yesterday, we need to have more policies to help with our activities. And so, what our members found out in their activities is that there is a lack of access to and high cost of spare parts. That there is a lack of appropriate repair information that they can access from manufacturers, and that products are designed more and more to be less repairable. So that's an issue, and that's why we also cooperate with the EEB, with the Restart project, with iFixit, to the campaign that already showed some pictures about this campaign before. So, like for example, these washing machines were retrieved from one of our members in Brussels, Les Petits Riens. We also work a lot on the refurbishment of white goods. What we think is also very important, and that's why the last scheme that former presenter was Denis Coppet showed was quite important, because it also mentioned the relation that reuse and repair centers need to have with municipalities, with retailers, with a whole ecosystem. Because now, more and more, discarded products are collected by retailers, by municipalities. And it's more and more difficult to have access to this material, which could be refurbished and reused. And these collection systems need to be set up in a way which safeguard reusability. Because otherwise, what you can access won't be repairable, or if it's repairable at very high cost, which is not worth it, because our members will need to create profits if they want to create jobs. So it needs to be cost effective. It's really different pattern than when you are DIY repairer, where you can spend all the time you want because you like the product, you want it to work. Here they need to have like a cost-effective activity. So for that you need early identification of reusable goods. So basically at the collection point you could have someone checking if the products that you want to discard are still repairable, and then give them an appropriate weatherproof covering to support it smoothly. I think it's a quicker access to the waste stream. So I mentioned that before. You need to that municipalities, that retailers, that producer responsibility organization schemes give access to the products that they know have to collect. Because you know when you pay a new product, when you buy a new product, you pay an EPR fee, which will then go to a producer responsibility organization, which is mainly managed by producers themselves. So it's a polluter payer principle applied, but it also means that the polluter has the right to decide how this money will be spent. So in general, it goes to recycling and not to repair, because they are producers. They decide how this EPR fee will be spent. So in general, they don't want to encourage reuse because it's competition. So we need to have policies which force them to finance with this EPR fee proportion, like a good share of preparing for reuse and repair activities. We need to have targets at a national level, or even like the Green will have to have preparing for use target at EU level. Because for now it's only it's combined preparing for reuse and recycling targets, but which makes that in the end it's only a recycling target. So we need a separate reuse target at EU level to make sure that the proportion of what is collected is prepared for reuse.
If it's a question for clarification, we can go.
Well, it's not one question. If you have private collectors in Brussels,
Sorry?
in Germany we have some private collectors. They put up containers without names, and then those people put the clothes in and they go to the problem.
Not really, no.
All the private collectors.
So don't do with the closest professional degree.
So quickly on the Reuse project, it's a Life Plus project in which reuse is involved to promote prevention and reuse culture of electronics in Greece. So before there was no official recycling center for electronics in Athens and Thessaloniki, and this project was there to finance the setting up of a recycling center which would prioritize preparing for reuse. So for now, mainly these sorting centers are specialized in ICT refurbishing. And we try with this project with reuse to kind of collect data on reuse and preparing for reuse at EU level. So yeah, I think this was my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, as I said, we will have a chance to talk to him after all three presentations were given. So from an international overarching point of view, we go to a local, not only mistaken, kind of local. Please welcome on stage Dr. Isabel Ordonez, who is actually a Chilean with a PhD degree in human technology design. And in the corporate thesis, which was entitled Designing Out the Waste, Exploring Barriers for Material Circulation, she suggests ways to increase the amount of materials recovered through new product development. But that's not where she stops at all. She is here as part of a cure for the least cost, a cure which means Center for Urban Remanufacturing. And with that, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to see many of you here. I'm going to talk about enabling remanufacturing, and it's written like that because in the literature, remanufacturing means that the original producer takes back their products after use. So enabling remanufacturing, it's written like that because in the literature, remanufacturing is normally the original product producer takes back his products after and repairs it or remanufactures it to a good as new condition. But what we want to enable is manufacturing with second-hand materials, basically. So a lot of people say, oh, but that's material reuse. But I would like to stress that it is actually manufacturing and that we want to shift production in this sort of way. That's why I'm stubborn, yes, but it's why it's called like that. So the Centers for Urban Remanufacture, the idea was basically a physical place, but also the network of actors that provides experiments and reuses or remanufactures secondary material. So this is very broad and wide, and it's had several types of names: zero waste centers, reuse centers, urban resource centers, repair cafes, fab labs. A lot of different initiatives are doing similar things, and these were the inspiration. But the main kind of core idea of this is waste prevention activities, and basically to make it easy in cities to be able to use the material that is available there for local production. So with that, we did last year a Pathfinder project financed by the EIT Climate Kick. We have all the information on the project on that webpage. And it ran between August and December last year. And it was basically exploring this idea and testing to see if we found people involved. These were our actors. We had a kind of practice partner in Berlin and Gothenburg, and both universities in Berlin and Gothenburg. And so the Pathfinder goals were three main goals. First, to review similar initiatives that have been a source of inspiration. Then to estimate the potential benefits and risks of setting this sort of thing up, specifically in these two locations, Gothenburg and Berlin. And lastly, to engage local actors to see if we could establish a cure in their city. So the main results are these three. We've done an open access article on an initiative review. We've done a market analysis for Gothenburg and Berlin, and a couple of networking events in both locations. This is the open access article. You will be having access to the slides, and here there's a link down there, download here. It's basically a comparative study of 15 initiatives that support reuse and or remanufacturing by either providing secondary materials or access to open workshop spaces or manufacturing tools. And I'm briefly going to give a couple of examples. The slides also have links to the web pages of all the initiatives. This is the material map here in Berlin that sold secondary materials that they obtained directly from the people discarding them. Then there is Återbruket in Sweden and Gothenburg, and this is actually based at a recycling center. And to get around the legislation, what they do is they've designed it so you drive in with the stuff that you're going to leave for recycling, and you're met by a worker there that asks, can any of this be reused? If you say yes, they put it into a second-hand. And they have a traditional second-hand shop, but they also have this warehouse for materials, construction materials, and also industrial waste or semi-industrial waste, commercial waste maybe. And then there was a project in Copenhagen called the Guldminen, or the Gold Mine, lasted for 3 years, also located on a recycling center. This was the first example that I saw that had a workshop space on the recycling center. So the municipality chose which projects could work there, and the projects that were allowed to work there were allowed to, in closed hours, take out materials from the containers, so no one could see them, and use it for free. It only lasted 3 years, but there was a lot of good experiences there and a lot of knowledge gathered. And here you see like a homemade CNC machine with like these elegant table legs there at the wood mill. So it's like combining Fab Labs and maker spaces with recycling centers and secondary material. This was Fab Lab in Berlin. There's several Fab Labs and there's a lot of knowledge around Fab Labs. Some Fab Labs even have a focus on sustainability, like the Green Fab Lab in Barcelona or so on. And Back Kitchens, of course, one of my personal favorites. They already do use the secondary materials and have the open workshop spaces, but specific for bikes. And they have great stuff going around, so it's a great movement to learn from. This is the graphical abstract from that article. And basically, we analyze these 15 different initiatives, and well, you can't read it maybe that well, but we clustered it into 4 themes. First, how do they facilitate recovering secondary materials? And then, what are the spaces and tools that they use? And then, what events and activities they have? And then, how are they financed? What is the business aspect? And these are the subcategories that we found there. But with that, we came to what we call the Cure Flower. It's main 4 aspects that these sort of centers have to have. Secondary materials, open workshop spaces, that's where we started, but the activity and the main activities connected to a comment that was given for the keynote is capacity building, it's education, and it's hands-on practical education about materials and about the production processes. But also, it's important to have the entrepreneurship, to be able to finance these activities in the long term. So they're not interrupted because the volunteers suddenly don't have more time or run out of energy, which is a very common case. So that was the initiative review. The second goal is we basically do 2 market analysis for Berlin and Gothenburg. You can download the reports there. The cherries from the Berlin market analysis are that in Berlin, the most material-intensive companies are in trade fairs, creative industries, and craft and construction. It's a huge potential. There's over 180 fairs in Berlin a year. That's every other day. And these fairs and exhibitions use a lot of materials for 2 or 3 days, and then everything is tossed out. Statistics do not cover the materials that are currently recirculated, and that's why it's really interesting to see initiatives like Reuse that have a statistic of how much they're recovering, but it doesn't appear in any official statistics. And the waste hierarchy in Berlin is not achieved where most of the material here is incinerated. We know that at least a third is available for reuse or in conditions for reuse. So then we did these network activities, and we got a lot of local actors involved. There was a lot of interest in this idea, and a lot of people that shared similar ideas already. And here in Berlin, it's translated into the Haus der Materialisierung, which is, I don't know if you've heard about the Haus der Statistik model initiative. They're remodeling the Haus der Statistik by Alexanderplatz, and it's a 5-year renovation process. There is a possibility of pioneer users to use the space while the renovation is going on. And one of these pioneer users' themes is the Haus der Materialisierung, where we want to establish one of these centers here. And we've presented this idea to the reuse community in Berlin, and we had a kickoff in May. Just a kickoff of the idea. We're not allowed to bring people into the space yet, but it's part of the process. And just to give you an idea, behind that skyrise there is on Karl Marx Allee 1, basically. And so behind this you have the TV tower in Alexanderplatz. So it's smack in the middle of town. 2,500 square meters to be used. No heating or electricity at the moment, but we're working on that. But we would be very happy to get more people interested and involved. It's still an ongoing process. and I'm very open for suggestions and comments later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Also, you've had a chance to talk to her and ask questions, direct questions to her later on. So thanks also for making up for time. It's very helpful for us. Now, last but not least, we have Ms. Katarina Dulz, who Nico thanks so nice introduced already. She's University of Gothenburg and special rehabilitation pedagogue, I heard, and working on sustainability education. And of course, co-founder of the multifunctional repair cafe. Is it correct? I'm sorry, you can correct it. Take it away.
Okay, first of all, when I heard your speech, I have to apologize, my English is not that well or that good, so I didn't spoke English for at least 10 or 20 years. So I hope it's not too embarrassing for me. Second, I have to say what I try to present now is just wishful thinking. We didn't do this, but when Nico Pech asked me in 2013 if we try to invent a repair cafe in Oldenburg, I said yes, of course, let's do it, but I didn't really know what a repair cafe is. So 6 years later, we do have 8 repair cafes in a city of about 160,000 inhabitants, which is pretty much, I think. And what we learned in these 6 years were 3 points, which I want to describe a little bit better. First of all, people, as you know, they don't go to a repair cafe only to repair something or ask for help, but they go for communication and for reassurance that they're not the only one who are a little bit crazy or something like that. So they want communication and they want to learn. So what they asked for were workshops to learn by themselves how to repair the one thing or the other. And what we learned is in the activity of a repair cafe, it's impossible to have a workshop for special repair actions, because there are other people who try to get help and the professionals are not able to do both at the same time. So we try to get a space to offer special workshops for that. And the third thing is we need to somehow interest young people. There are a lot of students of Nico and me and other people from university, but we don't catch pupil and we don't catch other young people which without the students. So maybe I can. So what we did, we decided to invent a repair center not for 24/7, but at least 6 days a week to offer people professional reparation in connection with retailers. Nico Pech spoke about this already. He said we tried to get into contact with the downtown retailers to somehow interest them into retailing repairable products and to give the consumer the possibility to repair them after the warranty time. So they can use this repair center in the downtown of Oldenburg to repair not only the products they bought in the downtown shops, but everything else, of course. That was the beginning. Second was that we want to invent a lifelong learning center, not only for pupils and schools, but for everybody. Because, as I mentioned, people wanted to learn in a very specific way by doing themselves how to repair themselves without helping of professionals. It's my special interest to get schools and pupils into this center, especially from, of course, the city of Oldenburg, but of the surrounding as well, because what I learned from teachers they would like to do it. They ask me, we know everything about sustainable development. People know a lot of that, but